Hi, I'm Mathew Gnagy. I am the creator of The Modern Maker, and this is
Yannick Krüser. I'm doing historical tailoring, just like you do, but in a smaller scale. So basically doing with German stuff what you did during the last decade with Spanish stuff.
fantastic. As anyone who's been following along knows, I am starting the work on the Modern Maker series for the Giambattista Moroni Trunkhose from the Portrait of the Tailor. And that's been really fun. I've already started the work and I've kind of been photographing it as I go. But the work, when I say the work, I mean making the panes because there's 70 of them that I have to make to go around the entire trunk hose. And they're all like folded and then they have a little band on the inside to cover the raw edges, and it's a lot of work. So I've started the sewing now, so that, and about halfway through I think maybe I'll turn the camera on so I can have a so that I can, start showing people how it's done. But I am going to cheat because I don't have time in my life to hand sew 70 panes. So I'm hand sewing about half of them. And then the other half, I'm using my blind hammer machine to do it. So I press the edges in and I put the sort of the cover on the back, and then I use the blind hammer to go down the sides of that piece, and then it looks like hand pick stitching on the outside, and it's perfect. So
I mean, why not?
right, I mean, I have the machine, I don't have the time, so I'm going to make use of it. And with the only frustrating thing is I'm not really going to be able to talk about it much in the videos because a blind hammer is a rare machine in most people's workshops. It's a strange little machine that has a curved needle and like a V-shaped feed dog so that the fabric kind of goes up and over, and then the needle just picks a tiny little pick as it rocks through.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not a machine that most people have. I mean, it's a fantastic machine, and I use it for everything from doing actual hems to pad stitching, and in this case, hemming the facings onto the back of the panes. But I had a really fun time getting started on the work yesterday because I'm finally over my jet lag from coming back from Sweden. And I have the whole pattern printed out. And I started like working with it and came to this really cool realization about the geometry of it and what it will do when I make it up. So I'll put a diagram here on the final video so that people can actually see what I'm talking about. But in this style, very similar to what's going on in the Moritz pluderhosen, there is the center section that has the crotch in it and the inner thigh area. That is all one piece. All the other panes are made separately, but the inner thigh area and the crotch are all part of a single piece of fabric. Now,
Yeah.
in the Moritz hosen, that's made from like a single strip, and then the crotch is cut in and then it's spread into this Y shape that works really, really beautifully. In the Italian style, I'm basing this off of the Dongazzia de Medici trunk hose that are in Patterns of Fashion 3. And their center panel is just past center front and past center back, and then there's several panes hanging off
Yeah.
of it at the bottom. And so that's how I did it. But when I process those panes and I hem them back and I put the facing on the back of them so that they work like they're supposed to, when I like imagine that this is the crotch shape here, and then it's quite straight along the bottom where the inseam is. But when I align all of those panes at the bottom, once the hems are folded back, then the whole thing is going to arc this way
Yeah.
from the inseam to the outseam, which means when it arcs this way, it's going to hold much better against the inner side of the thigh. And then when I gather the top, it's going to have a much more balloon shape to it because it's going from a relatively straight strip into a pretty clear arc portion of a cone. And that geometry lends itself really well to a balloon shape. And I'm so excited because I never would have like thought about that unless I copied this pattern exactly from the original garment.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that pans out. And then also there's that funky little extra piece that happens at center back at the top of
Yeah.
the waist. which you have that same piecing in the Moritz Trunkhose. And I'm wondering how common it was, because these are from the originals, the Don Garcia. I think they're probably 1560, 1550 something, maybe 57. I can't remember exactly the date right now. Even though I have the book right next to me, I can't put it on screen because of copyright. But this shape of this piece is a little weird, and the geometry of the seat is different than I would normally do it. And I'm really excited about that, to see how it fits and how it feels, because I have always defaulted to my standard practice for a crotch and a seat. Whereas this one has this funky piece that goes in at center back. Here's a diagram for you all to see what I'm talking about. And also it has the gusset that comes at the bottom of the codpiece. Those are just very exciting for me, and I'm really looking forward to experimenting with it and seeing how it feels and dresses. The codpiece, once I printed the pattern off, the codpiece seems quite small, which is perfect, because the one in the painting is quite small, which is what it needs to be. And I've already started doing some processing of like the edges of the paints that I've completed. I've clipped along the edge. So they're pretty cool, and I'm very excited about that.
Will you do like internal padding, or will you just use a hip roll on the doublet?
I really don't know at this point. Because of the way the waistband is made on the Don Garcia trunk hose, I think that I could very easily put the hip roll on the bottom of the doublet. I mean, I definitely put the hip roll on the bottom of the doublet before I got dressed for the photos. The only issue that I'm having is I have to look at the extant pieces that have the hip roll and the proportion of the hip roll and find out how it's shaped. Because the problem that I'm having is, you make the sausage roll and then you stick it in, and when it goes around the body, it just flattens. And I find that a little bit problematic.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to tell. I mean, we have one of the patterns actually taken from the hip roll, and it just looks like a straight piece that is just whip stitched without any gathering to the bottom edge of the doublet. So I think you need some experimentation basically to see how dense can the stuffing be and where exactly does it need to sit on the body before you can comfortably say, yeah, okay, in this case I can wear a hip roll, in this case I cannot. So it's
Yeah.
still like new territory for basically
Yeah.
all of us.
In order for it to sit like a donut around the hip, it has to be pulled inward in the center so that it creates a ring. Otherwise, the thickness of the padding, the outer edge of the fabric will try to match the measurement of the inner edge of the fabric against the body, and the whole thing just gets squashed rather than
Yeah.
sitting out. And the silhouette is wrong. I mean, the photographs that I took of me wearing the doublet from the painting out in my yard with trunk hose that can easily accommodate the hip roll, like it didn't look right because that hip roll is so squashed against the body. So I may just use a separate hip roll just so that the silhouette is correct.
And I mean, if you look at the Extant doublets with a hip roll attached, you can see that the hip roll is still basically angling out, that it still has this shape from years of wear.
I need to be able to make it so that the outer edge of the hip roll is a longer circumference than the inner edge of the hip roll. That's the only way the geometry actually works, and that's the only way you get the silhouette that's correct.
I think there might have been some variation on the Extant garments anyway. I mean, there is one doublet that has one continuous hip roll all around the waist. Most of the Extant doublets have like two separate smaller hip rolls with a split on center back and center front. So I think you can just try and see what kind of hip roll gives you the shape you want, because this is what they would have done anyway back
Yeah.
then.
Well, I really like the idea of the one that's split at center back. And the reason why I like that is because there doesn't seem to be a lot of accommodation for length to go up over the hip roll to get to the waist at center back. So if it's split, when the person sits down, that center back seam is going to be pulled tight, right? And so when they sit down, if that center back seam is pulled tight, then it just dives between the split in the roll, making it easier to sit down.
I actually thought about that we could perhaps in another segment, perhaps we could actually do that right now, because I have one of the pictures of the pink summer doublet because I thought it might be nice for people if you just looked at it together, because you used it to a certain degree for your last doublet. I will use it for my next doublet. And as we were just talking about basically hip rolls, perhaps looking at it together and just telling people what is interesting about this extant piece might be pretty cool.
Okay, so let's start discussing here. Yeah, absolutely. Look at the hip roll. Look at that. It's gathered at the top. You can see with the wrinkles, it is pinched at the top when it's sewn on so that it flares out. It's right there in front of me, and I missed it.
I always assumed that the wrinkles were just due to the hip roll curving around the body, but you might be right. It's just pretty hard to see in that area.
Yes, it's partly due to the hip roll curving around the body, but this is making the hip roll into that torus shape that it needs to be in order to sit outward. Otherwise, this would just collapse against the body the way yours and mine have both done. So it absolutely has to be reduced in circumference on the inner edge. So it has to be, the length of the hip roll has to be made longer than the length of the waist of the doublet. And then you reduce it. So it looks like, I would say for that quarter panel, that quarter panel is almost it's almost 10 centimeters shorter. That quarter panel is almost 10 centimeters shorter on the inner edge. If you think about it, each one of these tucks pulls it in about a centimeter.
Yeah, true.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So yeah, so the hip roll then needs to be 40 centimeters longer than the waist of the doublet that it's getting sewn into to give it the shape that it needs to be. This is perfect. It's absolutely perfect, Yannick. Thank you so much for sharing this photo, because that's what I need to be able to tell people is like, I missed this on my first attempt, so the photographs don't look good. So when I make this now for the final video, then we're going to absolutely do this. But it's really easy to read just looking at this right here. It's absolutely easy to see that that's precisely what they've done. And they have this rounded edge at the front, which is exactly the way that the trunk hose are hanging in the portrait in the tailor. It could be really clear that this shape is underneath there, and almost it's exact same proportion now that I'm looking at it at the same time as the photo. So whatever the dimensions of this are is what I'll try to replicate. Do you know what the diameter of this is from the research?
I think about 6 centimeters, but I will have to double check. I have the pattern of the hip roll.
Diameter is 6 centimeters. Okay.
I think so. Perhaps to give a little context what we're looking at right now, because it might not be clear for everybody.
Oh, that's true.
What is this? So that's a summer doublet that once belonged to Duke Moritz of Sachsen-Lauenburg, who died in 1612. But this doublet obviously is a little bit older. So it is referred to as an old summer doublet in a list that was made after his death. So we can assume that this is from the 1590s, perhaps from the 80s, or even the late 70s. Oh. And yeah, it's an odd doublet for many reasons. Not only because it has this hip roll without any additional skirts at the waist, but also because it's very, very light construction-wise.
Yeah.
I think one of the most interesting examples of a doublet with a hip roll, just because you can see the hip roll so clearly. There are no skirts covering it, so you have good opportunity to just look at it and look at the details.
Yeah, fantastic. Because if the diameter is 6 centimeters, then you multiply times pi. So that gives us 18.8 centimeters in circumference. And then you add seam allowance onto that at the waist edge. So 20 centimeters should be correct.
Might be a little bit smaller, because I think it was measured from the top of the bottom, and as it's tear-shaped, it might be a little bit longer that way. So it's not as thick as it's long, the hip roll. So when they measure like 6 centimeters, that might be more than it's actually broad. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So then I'll cut it at 18. and then it should end up around 16.5 in diameter.
I just think it's easier to make them too big than too small. Like if they're done correctly, they will basically have their, like they will do their job even if they're a little bit smaller.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This one doesn't look like it's stuffed particularly hard. Do you know anything about the texture of the roll itself?
Not really, but I don't know. It looks pretty solid to me. I mean,
What?
sure, there are these wrinkles, but even after all this time, it's still pretty solid. It's not like it's basically crumbled together.
Yeah. And I'm curious about that because when I was in Sweden this last time, we had this wonderful opportunity to look at some really old 1800s women's wear. And they have a roll attached to the bottom of the bodices that is very similar to this. And that roll is specifically to keep the skirt locked in place and give it the right drape.
Oh, interesting.
And
Yeah, it's
so
actually pretty similar. Yeah.
yeah, it serves exactly the same function, and it is made just like this, where it's just a plain colored linen stuffed. But those rolls on those ladies' garments, they are hard stuffed. Like it feels like there's rope inside.
Yeah.
There may be, I would say there may be 5 centimeters in diameter tops. It kind of goes against my theory that it should be a little bit softer for this, just so that the drape is soft, because the line can't be a hard line. But maybe when it's done correctly, it won't matter. But that hip roll really says all the things that we needed to say, and now I have all this information. Now, is this hip roll split at center back, or does this one continue?
Yes, it is.
Wow, look at that. That is fantastic. And the skirt is split, and you can see once again that it has been eased onto the waist of the doublet. And there's actually weird pick stitches just below where it is attached. Can you see that there?
Yeah, pretty rough pick stitches. Like these don't look that good.
They're trying to create a flat spot at the top of the roll. So the roll itself would be this shape, right? The roll itself would be this shape, but they're trying to create a little flat section at the top so that the waistband of the breeches can come up over and sit comfortably without being completely canted out. It actually will drape down. And that also moves the stuffing a little bit further down in the roll. It could also possibly make the outer edge of the roll tighter and stiffer when you add more pressure with those stitches. They do look pretty sloppy, and it looks pretty clear that they're done after the roll has been stitched on.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's mainly to give some more tension to the stuffing.
Yeah,
I mean,
think. Okay.
Like I don't think that you're wrong. Like it might be to give the roll a little flat section at the top, because the other hip rolls that are not directly whip stitched to the doublet waist have a flat section. They are constructed a little bit different. They have a flat section. These don't, so the stitching might have just done that too.
What's on your table?
Actually, not that much because it's warm and I'm not that productive at the moment. But one thing I noticed again during the last weeks is how hard translating stuff can be, especially when we're talking about a topic like historical clothing. Because not only do we have the original words that were used in the time period that we kind of have to use in our modern language, but we also have to see, okay, what word was used for this garment at that time in another language, what word is used today in that other language. So when I was trying to write the article for the footer hem, for the lined shirt, because we are publishing the pattern for the footer hem, it was pretty hard to decide how do I translate it while keeping the meaning of the original word. Because footer lining is pretty obvious, but is a footer hem really a lined shirt? Like, is that what it is in English? And that's pretty hard at some times, I think. Just deciding.
I can relate. And the way that I've always done that with the Spanish texts is to just think like a tailor. I know how we talk about clothes in modern English and what the context of each of those words is and how we approach thinking about a garment and pattern making. And so there are some phrases which don't really translate well, which are, if I were explaining this garment in English, this is the word that I would use. And if I were explaining it in modern Spanish, this is the word that I would use. And sometimes the thing that I ended up doing with Spanish a lot is that modern Spanish words for sewing aren't always the same as the old Spanish words for sewing, but a lot of those words still persist in other relative languages. So like if I couldn't find something in Spanish, I might look to Portuguese, or I might look to French or Italian, something similar, what a cognate word means in those languages. I even went to Romanian at one point to get some context on a word. I can't remember what it was at this point, but I do remember that I found the answer in Romanian. It was really fascinating.
I think what makes it extra difficult is just the fact that it's not always that obvious why a specific name was chosen, because you have several ways of interpreting a word. Like, and they all might seem right, like they all would work as a translation or as a reason for naming it that way. But if you look at hemd, shirt, for example, is it a shirt because it's shirt shaped? Does it serve the function of a shirt? Like, these are very different reasons to call it that way, even though both basically are correct for that word. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, for the people back then, it was pretty obvious why it was called like that. So they didn't need to write it down. But it's not that obvious for us anymore, especially when garments are not in use anymore. Like, there are some garments that still basically survive to this day in a changed form, of course, not exactly as they were back then. But some garments are still in our heads. Like, we know what they are. We know how they were used. But when you look at the footer hemd, there is no direct relative today for that, I think, which makes it extra hard.
I mean, we make them out of different fabrics now, but there's got to be something that holds that same place.
Yeah, in some way, definitely. I don't think, though, that it was worn under a doublet. Like, it's really, really baggy. It kind of looks like the garments chefs wear sometimes. You know, these wide double-breasted coats. So shape-wise, it kind of looks like that, but it's padded and really, really wide. So just silhouette-wise, it would be hard to find something comparable today. But of course, you're right. But of course, we have garments meant for the same purpose. That's right.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching. This has been absolutely fun. We've gone into a lot of detail about extant garments and how we're going to get the hip roll to function with the trunk hose. And, I've talked a little bit about the trunk hose and shown the pattern, and then we've compared that to some things in the pluderhosen that Yannick is working on. And hopefully sometime soon we'll have permission to share some more photos of those pluderhosen so that we can really show you what we're looking at and what those comparisons are to what I'm making in the tutorial, what he's studying, and then eventually there will be things written about those pluderhosen that you all can use and experience. I'm really excited about the future of the study of that collection. I think it's so cool. So thank you very much. I'm Mathew Gnagy. This has been the Modern Maker Podcast, Deep Craft, and I will talk to you all soon.
And I'm Yannick Pruser. Thank you for listening, and until next month.
Take care, everyone. Bye.